welcome to the OFAH's Inside Access event on moose points and the results of the 2021 moose tag allocation process. My name is Mark Ryckman. I'm the manager of the policy team at the OFAH, and I'll be your host for tonight's event. Unfortunately, something came up unexpectedly, and our wildlife biologist, Dr. Keith Monroe, is unable to attend tonight's event. So I'm here in Keith's place. The OFAH is committed to ensuring that hunters have the information they need to navigate the new moose system. And tonight is our second Inside Access event on moose. And the video of last year's webinar is available on our website, along with several other educational pieces on the new moose system. So I highly recommend you go check those out if you have a chance at ofah.org/moose. So just a few housekeeping items before we dive into the session. The session, as you'll see, is being run in Zoom webinar, which means that only panelists like myself and our presenters will have their cameras and microphones on. As I said earlier, we have about 700 people registered for the event tonight, and this format really helps the event run more smoothly when there's that many people involved. The session is also being recorded, as you can probably see on your screen there, and the video will probably be available sometime next week. So don't worry, all registrants will receive an email letting you know when the recording becomes available. So the way tonight's session is going to work is there will be about an hour-long presentation, followed by about 30 minutes of questions, although we have a little bit of flexibility to go a little bit over time if we're being flooded with questions and we simply can't get to them all. So if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function down at the bottom that some people have already found to ask them. And the OFAH Director of Policy and Programs, Matt DeMille, is moderating the questions, moderating the Q&A, and we'll be asking them to our guest on behalf of the audience later on in the session. Unfortunately, we may not be able to get to all of the questions tonight, depending on how engaged folks are and how many questions people are asking. But I can say that for myself and Dr. Keith Monroe, our wildlife biologist, as well as other OFAH staff, can follow up with people after the event if there are several outstanding questions that really need to be answered. So a lot of you actually provided questions in advance about the points ahead of tonight's session. So we actually took that feedback and provided it to the NDMNRF early so that they could try to address as many of those questions in their presentation as possible. Just one final point is about the scope of tonight's session. So the focus is on walking hunters through the 2021 allocation and points data that the NDMNRF has published to make sure that hunters have the info they need when they're applying this year. We did receive a fair number of questions about other aspects of the moose changes or concerns about the changes themselves. And we fully recognize and acknowledge that hunters want to have that discussion. They want to have that conversation. They want to provide their input to the MNRF. And we actually continue to provide that hunter feedback about the changes to the NDMNRF on hunters' behalf. But I want to make clear that that is not the focus of tonight's session. We're here to talk about the point system and some of the results from last year. So that said, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Patrick Hubert. Patrick is a senior wildlife policy advisor with the wildlife section of the NDMNRF. And just as an FYI, I may interject from time to time during Patrick's presentation, just to ensure that if there's a point that really needs to be clarified, especially ones that we've heard several questions from the hunt community, I will probably interject briefly. But a reminder to get your questions in using the Q&A function, and we will tackle those as many as we can after Patrick's presentation. So welcome, Patrick, and I will throw it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate OFAH having us again this year. It was greatly appreciate the opportunity to come last year and talk to hunters, and hopefully hunters found that insightful last year. And this year, again, coming with a lot of information to share. I think before I start actually showing and getting into the slides, I would mention that we know that there are a lot lot of questions folks have, a lot of topics folks would like to discuss. We'll cover a lot of ground tonight, but I'm sure that unfortunately won't get to it, all of it. But as you mentioned, we're committed to trying to address those. So we'll work with you to provide those answers as a follow-up after the fact. So as I pull up my screen here as well, my presentation, I would also like to acknowledge my colleague, Kyle Morrison, who's Dr. Kyle Morrison, who's with us tonight and has done considerable work pulling this material together. In particular, deep dive into a lot of data that came out of the allocation process. So as we get into questions in particular, Kyle will be available to help address some of those specific questions we may have as we go. But without further ado, I'm going to get right into it again because we have a lot of material to get to tonight. So broadly, the content we intend to cover tonight is just a bit of a primer on moose harvest planning. Dr. Monroe felt that it might be helpful for some hunters if we pull back the curtain a bit on harvest planning and help explain a bit of the rigor in that process. Then we'll talk about the allocation process, a bit of a reminder to folks on how it works, maybe to clarify some points that we've heard or concerns or uncertainties. Then we'll get into actual results from the 2021 allocation process. Finally, toward the end, we then move into how those results and the information that we've provided in a number of forums and places can help hunters strategize their applications, and maybe some consideration for hunters in how they might apply specifically. And then finally, we'll conclude with a slide that has the links to a lot of that information on our website. So to begin with, we'll talk a bit about the harvest planning process. And again, I want folks to appreciate that this is quite an intensive process each year. Again, we do this every year. Starts really some of the earliest work on the harvest planning process begins late fall, but really in earnest early in the new year once we start to get our hunter reporting data and our moose aerial inventory information in. The planning process results in tag quotas for resident hunters for the same year and for the tourism industry in the next year. And that allows for the tourism industry specifically to better market their opportunities a year ahead of time. The current planning process is using or guided by a transitional guideline. As we implement these changes, we recognize that there's a need to learn from the results as we go before we land a more permanent guideline that will help folks appreciate how specifically we will plan in the future. So that's likely going to continue for another couple of years, if not several years, until these changes are implemented. The draft harvest plans each year are reviewed in great detail by the Big Game Management Advisory Committee that makes pretty substantial recommendations oftentimes on the plans themselves with both resident hunters and the tourism industry in mind. And what we're really trying to achieve is to ensure that our harvest is being planned at a biologically appropriate level for a population relative to the objective. And that's not only the number of moose that could be harvested, but what proportions of bulls, cows, and calves are in that harvest. We would eventually like to, once the changes are implemented, move to more stable moose tag quotas. We do often get questions from hunters about why quotas may change in years when we haven't had a new moose aerial inventory, for example. And we do hope to get to more stable quotas for units that don't have surveys, but that's likely not going to be the case, at least while we're implementing these changes. So the figure at the right just provides a very oversimplified diagram of the planning process. We really start with information on the moose population, again, relative to the population objective. And so really this is the most critical piece really from a biological perspective is how well is our moose population in an area doing? So this is essentially the allowable harvest for an area. Once we've determined the number of moose that can be harvested in a given year or within a given plan, that harvest is allocated between the residents and the tourism industry. And we have a kind of a prescribed level at the provincial scale and then for each WMU that guides that. And then we divide that up among bulls, cows, and calves. We have a step where we allocate the resident harvest to gun and bow that I won't focus on tonight. But then finally, a critical step at the end is actually using the numbers of planned harvest of moose to determine the actual tag quotas. And so I'll provide an example of that to help folks appreciate how that works. So again, back to the kind of the top of that harvest planning process. Again, we're looking at the population status relative to the population objective. So in this particular example, we're looking at a population that's really fairly robust. So a population that's above its objective range. So we can harvest that population a bit more aggressively. So an 8 to 14% harvest, which is fairly high. So in this particular example population of 1,000 moose, just for simplicity's sake, we have a planned harvest of 10%, which means that we can harvest in that plan 100 moose out of that population. As I mentioned, the next step is then to allocate the harvest between the residents and the tourism industry. So in this particular example, those 100 moose are divided with 90% going to residents and 10% for the tourism industry. And that's the provincial direction for allocation between residents and the tourism industry. And then we look at the harvest proportions. And again, this is to address what's biologically appropriate. So we can't harvest all bulls. We need to be very protective of our cows. And we also don't want to harvest all calves. So kind of the ideal harvest proportions based on a lot of modeling work over the years are somewhere in the range of 50% bulls, 20% cows, and 30% calves. And what you see there at the bottom then is what that results in for the residents, 45 bulls, 18 cows, 27 calves, and the tourism industry, 5 bulls, 2 cows, 3 calves. As I mentioned, I'm skipping the bow and gun allocation step, but we're dealing with the same number of moose, just split among gun and bow. But I wanted to provide an example of tag fill rates because it's the one factor that typically drives changes in tag quotas in years where we haven't had a moose aerial inventory. So the fill rate is the proportion of each of that tag type in each WMU that's used for harvested moose. So it equates to hunter success roughly, or tag success more specifically. It can be quite variable over time, and that's why we typically use a multi-year average. So any given year doesn't have a big impact on tag numbers. But the important thing to note with tag fill rates, because we've seen our tag fill rates, particularly for high demand tag types like bull tags, increasing over the years, is that high fill rates or increasing fill rates can drive tag numbers down even when we're looking to harvest the same number of moose in a population. So this particular example that I've shown in the figure at the bottom and in the box at the top right there are it's for one tag type where the fill rate has been relatively steady over time. And for 2021, as an example, the fill rate sits at 21%. And then the other tag type, which is somewhat more typical of what we're seeing with bull tags, particularly gun bull tags, and in some cases, bull bow tags as well, is a fill rate that's increased over time. And so what you see in 2021 for that particular tag type is, for the same planned harvest of moose, so 100 moose in each case, it results with a 65% fill rate. It results in a lot fewer tags. So it's an exaggerated example in some sense, but not unlike what we see in the comparison between bull and cow tags or cow calf tags now. And I think it's important to mention this because we've had a number of hunters that have concerns about that we're trying to over-harvest cows, for example. And that's not the case at all. We're actually quite protective of cows in our harvest planning. But given that cows typically have a fairly low tag fill rate, it'll generate a lot more tags for the same number of harvest of moose compared to bull tags, which have a much higher fill rate. So that's just a very quick example. And again, oversimplifying a process that takes a lot of time and a lot more information that's presented here. But hopefully that helps hunters better appreciate how we go about harvest planning. So I'm going to continue, Keith, unless, excuse me, sorry, Mark, unless there are questions that folks would like me to address on this aspect, because we'll then move on to the allocation process.
There are some questions related to this, but I think given the scope of tonight's presentation and the priority on the newer information, how about we move on? And if we have time after your presentation, then we'll try to tackle some of those ones too.
Sounds good. I'll carry on. So now briefly in the next few slides, I just want to provide folks a reminder of how the points-based allocation process works. And this slide, I just want to kind of outline at a high level the basic structure of the process itself. So folks, hopefully everybody on here is at least somewhat familiar with the process. It's a two-stage process with a primary allocation stage, followed by a second chance allocation stage, where we allocate tags that weren't awarded or weren't claimed in the primary. Each stage gives hunters the opportunity to apply for up to 3 choices for different tag types. And I should mention that at times in the presentation tonight, I will use choice and step interchangeably because the actual process itself, we undertake in a stepwise fashion. So in the primary, we consider all step 1 applications first, then step 2, then step 3. And we'll talk about that in more detail on in the next few slides here. So once we've gone through the primary allocation stage and tags are awarded, hunters have a period of time to choose whether to claim those tags. And as I mentioned, tags that are not awarded or are not claimed then are available in the second chance allocation stage. And of course, we publish those updated tags available numbers for hunters to inform their applications for that second stage. The second chance allocation stage is similar to the first in that the hunters have up to 3 choices. But the difference between the 2 stages is that all the tags in the primary allocation are awarded based on points. And only the first step or first choices in the second chance allocation are based on points. And any tag that is claimed that was awarded based on points, the hunter forfeits their points. So their points are reset to 0. The last 2 steps, though, in the second chance allocation, tags are awarded by random draw. And in those 2 steps, a hunter that's awarded a tag will not only retain their points, but gain a point for having applied that year. So now to look at the process in a bit more detail and explain kind of how it proceeds. So now we're going back and focusing on the primary allocation stage. Each tag type, and that means WMU, moose type, and season, is awarded separately in a series of up to 3 steps based on the hunter's up to 3 choices. In this particular example, it shows that kind of how the ministry goes about undertaking that process. So we order the hunters based on the points that they have. And in this particular example, the table shows the top applicants in this case have 16 points. There were 30 tags available of this particular type. There were 6 applicants with their first choice at 16 points. And so all those applicants received a tag. So 6 tags were awarded. Then we proceed then to the next point level. So in this case, the next bunch of applicants have 15 points. There are 24 tags remaining available, again, because 6 have been awarded. There were 8 applicants. All 8 of those applicants with 15 points receive a tag. Again, 100% success. Then we move to hunters with 14 points. And on down the line until we get to hunters with 13 points. So at this stage in the process, there are only 2 tags remaining available, but we had 25 applicants. So in this case, these are tags that are being awarded based on points, but we have to use a random draw to break the tie. So 25 applicants for 2 tags, and a random draw is used to determine which 2 hunters are successful in that case. We had some additional applicants with their first choice in the primary stage with 12 points, 11 points, and 10 points, but there are no tags left. So the allocation of that tag type in the primary is complete. So in this case, all the tags are awarded with in the first step or based on first choice. And so there's no consideration of second or third choices at all.
Patrick, if I could just interject very quickly here, I think
Sure.
There's a very, very important point that we need to ensure that people are understanding. In the second chance allocation stage, the second and third choice are awarded by random draw.
That's
and
right.
If a hunter is awarded and claims a tag in that step, they do not use their points.
That's
but that
correct.
can't be confused with steps like this, where there is a random draw that occurs because there are far fewer tags than there are hunters or applicants left at that stage. And those people who would be awarded and claim those tags, in this case, the 2 remaining tags, they would lose their points.
That's correct.
To the other folks who would not.
Yep. Yeah, so there are two different, I guess, applications of a random draw. There's the application of a random draw to break a tie in a step or stage where tags are awarded based on points. And then, like you mentioned, the last two steps in the process, in the second chance allocation, we'll talk about next, those are entirely random draws. So there is no point component there to awarding tags.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Very good. So we'll actually now talk about an example in the second chance allocation stage. Hopefully we'll illustrate some of that potentially a bit better. So again, the hunters have in the second chance allocation stage the opportunity to make up to 3 choices for tag types, again, WMU, moose type, and season. In this particular example, so this is the step 1 or choice 1 for the hunters in the second chance, and it is point based. So our top point applicants have 4 points. There are 43 tags remaining available at this point in the process. There are only 2 applicants with 4 points, and so both get their tag, 100% allocation. And then we move on down through the process. So, but the important point about this example is we have more tags available than applicants at this stage. So all of these hunters are awarded tags based on points. If they claim them, again, this is the first step or first choice in the second chance, they do lose their points. But there were 17 tags that remain available after we completed this particular step. So those proceed on to the second choice in the second chance allocation. And that's a random draw, not based on points. And so the 17 hunters, assuming there are 17 people that apply at that stage, so the 17 that are successful, they not only don't lose their points, but they gain a point, for having applied. So they can claim the tag, they keep their points and gain a point. And it would be the same if there were tags remaining to move on to step 3, or the third choice for hunters. So yeah, that's an important point, that those last 2 steps in the process, if you're willing to take your chance to try to get a tag at that point, you won't lose points. So that's the difference in the second chance, is that your first choice is point-based, second and third is not. It's a random draw. So that's the end of the the quick review of the process itself. And now we'll start to move into some of the results of the process, and then information that we're providing to hunters and how it can inform their applications this year. So any questions, Mark, that you'd like to try to address now, or should we keep going?
I'm going to rely on Matt running the Q&A, and I'm actually going to answer a couple myself. Some folks are wondering where they can find that detailed information that you just used in an example. So we'll provide them with a link to the open data catalog and that big data set that's available for everybody. So I think at this point we can proceed, and we'll deal with the questions at the end.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and actually I should mention, some of that is available. Actually, those examples, I believe, do come from our moose tag process page. So if folks want to take a little more time, I think those come straight from that page.
Yeah, I think some of these folks are asking for the exact numbers from 2021. So we can point them to the open data catalog.
Very good. Okay, I'll proceed then. So first, wanted to share some general statistics from last year's allocation process. We had actually over 97,000 individual hunters that applied in either the first and or the second stage. And certainly there are some that applied only in the first, some only in the second, and many that applied in both. So you see, big numbers of hunters at both stages of the process. And I should note that this is a lot more individual hunters than we've seen applying in recent years. So, whether these are some of the new hunters that are like new potentially to moose hunting and starting to build points for future moose hunting opportunity, or even re-engaging some moose hunters that had kind of finally gotten frustrated with their lack of success in the old draw process, and figured, well, they built up a lot of kind of equity in the system over the years, and had a lot of points, so might as well get back in. There were almost 17,000 tags available, and that includes both adult and calf tags, given that we now have calf tag quotas across the province. And the vast majority of tags, those available tags, were awarded in the primary allocation stage last year. So, hunters did make good use of the opportunity to apply for those tags, and again, most were awarded. Just over half, though, of those were claimed, and we fully expected in the primary stage hunters wouldn't necessarily claim tags and wait and see maybe what was available in the second chance. So that left 80, just over 8,400 tags available in the second chance allocation. So still a lot of opportunity for hunters to apply for. And again, as in the primary, we awarded most of those tags. Over 7,000 of the tags were awarded in the second chance allocation stage. But again, like just over half were claimed in the second chance allocation stage. And we'll show some slides that kind of help folks better appreciate the patterns based not only on tag type, but part of the province. So overall, over 15,000 tags awarded. So a vast majority of the bull tags, actually almost all of the bull tags, were awarded in the process. Most of the cow-calf tags, and again, most of the calf tags as well. And when you look at claiming, though, lower percentages. So 87% of bull tags claimed, 81% of cow-calf tags, and 71% of calf tags. Also wanted to mention licenses sold. We did sell fewer moose licenses last year than we have in recent years. Typically, we're actually sell, I guess, the same number of folks that apply plus, several thousand because you had to purchase a license to apply in the draw process. So we're not surprised that it was lower, but it was lower than anticipated. And our estimated number of hunters was lower too. Now, one thing I will mention is, and this is an important point for hunters, is we are aware that some hunters assumed that having applied in the allocation process provided them a moose license, as it would have in the past. That's not the case, and we do know that there were some hunters that were hunting without a moose license, making that assumption. So that's a key point, is that all moose hunters must have a moose license, and your application does not provide you a license. You have to purchase that separately.
Yeah, that's a good point, Patrick, and something that we're going to be trying to communicate widely again as well, because we heard from some folks that, they admitted through their own misunderstanding of the system that there was some concern that they had hunted without a license. Unfortunately, thankfully, that's very, very few people, but any is too many. We want to make sure that we get that information out as much as possible. But just quick back of the napkin math here, based on the numbers, that looks like over 4,500 tags were not claimed. Is that correct? Is that roughly right?
12,298 tags claimed, as I calculated. So yeah, that would be about right.
Okay, so those are hunting opportunities that were allocated that were not taken up by hunters for whatever reason. I know you have some maps coming up here in a moment to show the spatial distribution across the province of where some of those tags were left behind, but that's an important number to note, and something we'll keep in mind going forward, trying to address as we continue to engage with the NDMNRF in discussions about how to improve the system as we move through the first few years of it. So,
yeah, I would say that of the entire process and how it worked, overall worked very, very well. I think that's probably the single greatest concern that we have, and we want to seek to improve on. Maybe there are short-term things that we can consider through communicating to hunters, and eventually we'll be reviewing the process and consider whether more significant changes are required to ensure that those opportunities aren't left on the table when there are hunters that, of course, want to participate.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the biggest concern. It's one thing if they're low demand tags in low demand areas, but I can't tell you that there are some hunters I'm sure plenty of hunters that were concerned that they just didn't have an opportunity to hunt, and there was no opportunity to claim those tags, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
Yeah, very good. And again, as you mentioned, we have some other information here, hopefully that will help hunters better appreciate what types of tags those are and where. But first, I did want to give hunters some information that helps them appreciate kind of where they fall in the distribution of points held by applicants. So these are the points held by applicants in 2021. So across the bottom axis there, the x-axis, you see point totals, and on the y-axis, you see the numbers of hunters with each point total. And I think the important thing for hunters to be aware of, I think the process may scare some, knowing that there are hunters that have a lot of points out there, but really most of our hunters have somewhere fewer than like 6 or 7 points. So vast majority of our hunters are don't have a ton of points. And particularly when you look at how many of our hunters are in the 0, 1, and 2 categories, a lot of these folks that are applying for tags have very few points. But we certainly do have a lot of hunters, and you gotta have to feel for those folks that had 30 points. Can you imagine all the years applying to reach that level? So this slide, this is actually a figure that's in the hunting regulation summary. If folks have seen it already. And the real the point to emphasize here is that many of the tags are awarded in the first choice, either of the primary allocation stage or the second chance stage, and particularly the higher demand tag types. So if you focus in on bull tags and you look at the primary allocation, 99% of bull tags are awarded in step 1 or choice 1. And similar in the second chance. So 92% of bull tags are awarded in step or choice 1. And so what this should tell hunters is that if you really want a particular tag type, you need to apply for that tag type with your first choice, not bank on it being there with your second choice, particularly higher demand tag types. So bull tags, most cow-calf tags in particular. Then shifting a bit to look at the point totals of successful hunters. So tags awarded by points of applicants in the figure there on the left. And you really see, and hopefully this is provides some encouragement to hunters who, again, don't have a lot of points. You see that we awarded a lot of tags. Actually, 70% of tags are awarded to hunters with 9 or less points, almost 50% to hunters with 4 or less points, and an additional 9% by one of the random draws in the last 2 steps of the second chance allocation. So while there are, again, a lot of hunters with a lot of points, and those hunters are able to access some of those really high demand tag types. If you want to hunt moose, you can find opportunities certainly without having a lot of points, or secure opportunities without having a lot of points. So now just want to look at a series of maps that display the minimum points required for different tag types. So this is for bull tags with bull gun on the left and bull bow on the right. And I'm sure this is maybe something that folks may want to come back to in the recording at some point, because it shows really where it took a lot of points to get to the types of tags folks may be interested in, and in other cases maybe less. So bull gun, really our highest demand tag type. Typically, you see that there are a lot of areas in kind of that deep green in Northern Ontario. Some of those areas not particularly accessible, certainly, and those would have been areas where we had at times surplus tags in the past. But areas that don't require a lot of points to secure a tag. Then you move into the lighter green shaded areas, require a few more points, particularly in West Ontario. Certainly when you get into Northeast Ontario, that part of the province where we have historically had our highest number of applicants and moose pressure over time, it does require a pretty significant number of points to get a bull gun tag. When you look at bull bow tags, generally similar patterns with less points required in areas further north and parts of Northwest, more points in Northeast, but less than what's required to get a bull gun tag. When you look at cow-calf tags, again, a similar overall pattern with areas further north requiring less points. There's more of the accessible north that fewer points are required for cow-calf gun tags. But it's worth noting that the points required for cow-calf gun tags in a number of areas were higher than for bull bow tags. So hunters should look at the points required depending on what type of tag they're most interested in an area, because you'll find some interesting patterns like that may be a bit surprising. If a hunter is really keen to hunt an adult moose, but it's not necessarily important for them to hunt a bull moose, the cow-calf bow tags provided a really good opportunity because it didn't require a great deal of points, even into parts of Southern Ontario, to secure a cow-calf bow tag. Now, I'll mention it now, and I'm sure I'll mention it again. That could change because hunters will begin to apply based on points required, and so they'll look and see and decide, yeah, I want to hunt an adult moose, but I don't need to hunt in the gun season, or I don't need to hunt a bull, and those cow-calf bow tags might start to look pretty appealing to some hunters. And finally, looking at calf tags, pretty green in much of the province, but there were certainly areas in parts of Northeast Ontario where there's historically been very high demand for tags, and even a couple of units in the south where it required a fair number of points to secure a calf tag. I think calf tags are the one tag type I would expect to see some changes in points required or the patterns for many of them, but I think calf tags may be more than others. So it'll be interesting to see what this map would look like next year after hunters have had this information and the opportunity to, again, strategize their applications a bit. And then finally, I did want to put up a map that shows tags unawarded and unclaimed. So in this case, a small number of tags unawarded or unclaimed are the red or the deep orange there. And what I think this should tell folks is that in those areas, the most popular hunting areas of the province, there were really relatively few tags unawarded or unclaimed. Most of those tags are very high demand, pretty exclusive, and so when folks get them, they claim them and use them. But as you move further north, and again in parts of the province where we would historically have had surplus tags in the past, potentially even tags that were not issued at all, we have higher numbers of tags unawarded or unclaimed.
Now, Patrick, that's the map that you're showing here is an aggregate of all tag types, correct? That were unclaimed?
This is all adult tags specifically,
All
so it doesn't include, right? Yeah.
Okay. So I know that, based on your previous numbers in one of your earlier slides, there were more calf tags unclaimed than there were cow tags or cow calf tags, followed by bull tags. But there's still quite a few, I think 13% you said, bull tags that were unclaimed across the province, correct? Now, is that spatial distribution of the tag types that were left unclaimed available anywhere? Is that in the public data set, or?
It could be gleaned from the open data catalog data that's available if folks wanted to get in and add that up. We haven't summarized that anywhere, but it is, like I said, it is available through the open data catalog information. And if hunters, and that would be potentially something of interest for hunters, particularly if you hunt in a specific wildlife management unit, to look and see kind of what happened with tags in those units, not only awarded, but claimed as well. And so we'll look at an example with the open data catalog to help folks kind of understand what's there. But it is there if folks are interested.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So now we're going to move on to some of that data that I guess it not only summarizes the results of a 2021 process, but it'll help inform their applications and strategies for the 2022 allocation process as well. Just briefly, before we get into some of that information, just wanted to provide a few thoughts on things that hunters may consider as they approach their applications this year, not only the primary, but eventually second chance. So it's important for hunters to identify, how do they wish to hunt, and what are their desires? Do they hunt by themselves, or prefer to hunt by themselves or in a party? Are they focused on a specific WMU? So do they have a camp in a WMU that they want to go to, or part of the province? So they're from some part of the province and they'd like to hunt there, or even a particular set of WMUs they'd like to consider, or do they have a preference for a particular type of moose? So is it an individual or group that really wants that opportunity to hunt a bull moose, or adult moose, or with a specific firearm type? So it's important to identify those factors, because it will help kind of narrow your choices and help you focus on the best opportunities. And then finally, I think it is important too, not only for individuals, but for parties to consider, do they want to hunt every year? Do they want to have a tag every year? Or are they only really interested in hunting when they can get their preferred tag type in their preferred WMU? Points that we've made before include things like, the points required in the allocation process, they aren't determined by the ministry. So it's entirely dependent on the number of applicants, their point totals, and the number of tags available. As we mentioned at the start, that can change from year to year. And of course, if there are fewer tags, that may have the effect of increasing the points required. We've published the points required. So we've published really a lot of the data from last year's allocation process, but there's no guarantee a hunter will be awarded a tag if they have the minimum points required last year. It could change. It should give hunters a pretty good sense of what ballpark at least they need to be in, but it won't guarantee them. And we do expect, we expect application patterns to change. We expect claim rates to change. And we expect minimum points required for each tag type will likely vary the most in this first couple of years of the process, as hunters continue to learn about the process and how they can apply to best suit their interests or needs. So we have, again, a lot of high point total hunters that are using their points. And as those folks use them, that will affect things. As I mentioned, once folks are more familiar with the process and are better strategizing their applications, that will affect points required. And as I mentioned, tag quotas as they change, that likely to have an effect as well. So the first source of information available to hunters is in the hunting regulations summary. So in this year's hunting regulations summary, and hopefully folks are seeing the reg summary, it's should now be available in paper in places. It's certainly available online now for folks that are interested. But there are tables for each tag type across the province. So bull gun, cow calf gun, bull bow, cow calf bow, and calf. And the table on the right is just part of the table for bull gun in the regulation summary. And so what it is showing is the first column there is, of course, the wildlife management unit. The second is the tags available for the primary allocation stage. Then we show minimum points required at the primary allocation stage. So in the first row there, WMU1A, there were 24 bull gun tags available in the primary. The minimum points required to be awarded to tag there was 1. There were 22 tags that passed through that primary stage and were available in the second chance. And then the points required in the second chance stage was 0. The asterisks are important, and they'll help hunters, again, strategize their applications. What the asterisks mean are that there were tags remaining available after we awarded all first choice applicants a tag. So there were tags left for second or potentially even third choices. And may not be a surprise that when we show bull gun tags, there weren't very many cases where there were tags available after first choice. So most of these, again, are being awarded to first choice applicants. The other important point is that the minimum points required data includes the northern resident preference point. So that non-accumulating point that a northern resident gets when they apply in a northern unit. So it's kind of baked in here. So there are not any hidden points that might trip hunters up here. So that's the regulation summary. We've already mentioned the excuse me, the open data catalog. So the open data catalog data is for those folks that really want to take a deep dive into the allocation process results. It kind of fully decomposes the results of the process. And so in this case, it shows an example for wildlife management 2. And in that first row, it kind of fully decomposes kind of each individual allocation step in the process. So for wildlife management 2, bull gun tags in the primary allocation stage, first choice applicants, there were applicants that had the highest point total were applicants with 10 points. And there were 2 of those applicants with 10 points. There were 99 tags available. So of course, both of those hunters were successful. And it proceeds through the entire allocation process. So the next highest point total applicant had 6 points. There was only 1 of those. Of course, there are 97 tags remaining available. And so that hunter is successful. And on down the line. The important thing, we already talked earlier about the random draw for ties. And so if you look at the WMU2 bull gun tags in the primary allocation stage, and you go down until there are the applicants with 1 point, you see there are 90 applicants, 31 tags available. So this is a case where there had to be a random draw to break a tie, but they're for tags still being awarded based on points, in this case, 1 point. And then there were still, there were applicants in the first choice of the primary stage with 0 points, but there are no tags left, of course. So those hunters, none of them were successful. There were other hunters that applied with their second choice for a bull gun tag in WMU2, but again, no tags left available. So this this open data catalog that can be downloaded, and you can open it in Excel, and you can do all the analysis you'd like. You see down at the bottom that it moves on then to the second chance allocation for WMU2 bull gun tags and what happened there. So all this information is there. Again, this is for hunters who want to download this data set and do kind of their own analysis or really analyze what happened. And it does show tags claimed for tags that were awarded at each one of those allocation steps. But I should mention that ministry staff aren't expected to help hunters walk through this really detailed data. So, if you're looking for help, please don't call our Natural Resources Information Center. This is, like I said, for those hunters who want to kind of take their own time and really dig into the data.
Patrick, I have to, give the government kudos for preparing and making and all of this detailed information available, because I know there's a good chunk of the moose hunting community that loves to dive into the numbers. So we really appreciate this kind of information. And this is the data set, presumably, that people would rely on if they wanted to figure out what tag types and how many of each were unclaimed across the province or in a particular wildlife management unit, correct? They would simply find their WMU, see if there were any left and of what type, correct?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, all credit to Kyle here on this one. He dove into this data and pulled this data set together, and the intention is to publish this each year, so folks will have the opportunity to look and see how this changes over time if that's what they want, but it's all there for them. So
yeah, that's great.
So those are the two key pieces of information available to inform the folks' applications this year. The other key pieces, and I'll provide the links kind of when we wrap up here in a few slides, but there's also on our webpage, on our moose population management page, we have tables showing moose population status relative to objectives. So folks can look at that data to better appreciate not only why tag numbers may be increasing or decreasing, but to help them appreciate where populations are doing well and maybe not so well. So it can inform actually where hunters may look for better opportunities or may not be quite as good of opportunity if, for example, a population is below objective. That's usually a pretty good indication that moose may be a little bit harder to find in that particular WMU. So a lot of information available for hunters to kind of inform their application strategies. So these next three slides, I've just kind of pulled together some hypothetical examples that may illustrate some of the basic considerations that hunters may want to make depending on their particular circumstances. This first example is an example of hunters, and we know that there are a number of hunters kind of that fall within this type of category. But hunters that are really committed to a wildlife management unit. So they probably have a camp in a wildlife management unit, and they want to ensure they have a tag so they can go to their camp and hunt moose that particular year. So they don't want to consider other WMUs, but they are willing to consider different types of tags to ensure they have one to hunt. So really their application strategy is focused on tag type within a specific WMU. So I pulled together some table here on the points required in this particular example, using Wildlife Management Unit 47, because it does illustrate a unit that very high demand, and a typical, pretty traditional hunt camp unit. So this is information from the hunting regulation summary. And I've pulled together all of the tag types for Wildlife Management Unit 47. So you look at the bull gun quota there. For last year, 52 tags, bull bow 7 tags, and on down the other tag types. The points required, again, as expected in this unit, quite high for most tag types. And I did include the second chance allocation stage, but of course, and hunters should consider what occurred in the second chance allocation stage. But of course, the primary is most pressing. So in this case, there's not a lot of difference between points required in the primary and second chance, except for possibly cow-calf bow tags. But otherwise, you see that the points required are pretty similar. And then finally, I included the 2022 tag quotas for the same tag types for comparison. So a hunter or group of hunters in a unit like this, they should expect, points required is going to remain high, particularly for high demand tag types and those tag types where the quota may have declined. So in the case of bull gun tags, there were 52 available last year, but only 39 available this year. So that reduction should right away indicate to folks that probably going to take more points to get one of those tags. Much the same with the cow-calf gun tags, where there were 30 available last year and 24 this year. This is an example where the tag quota has been reduced because of an increase in tag fill rates. So that in this particular hypothetical example, there are different ways, certainly, this group could go about it. I just threw out, again, some hypothetical point totals for this group of hunters. So 6 hunters that have 14, 10, 7, 4, 2, and 2 points. So, that group of hunters wants to go moose hunting in their unit. They want to figure out what's their best opportunity. So in this case, the hunter with 14 points looks to see which tag types had a minimum points required kind of in that ballpark. They'd like to have a bull tag if possible. So hunter with 14 points is going to apply in the primary allocation with their first choice for a bull bow tag, hoping that points required is similar to last year. The hunter with 10 points looks at the list there and doesn't really want to apply for a calf tag, and thinks that they have too many points, more points than they're going to be required for a cow-calf bow tag. So they're just going to apply for a point toward a future opportunity. So this is a case where the group is not only considering this year, but future opportunities. And then the hunter with 7 points is going to apply for the cow-calf bow tag because their point total is kind of in that ballpark as what it was last year. The hunters with the 2 hunters with 2 points each, they'll both apply for calf tags as well as the hunter with 4 points. They don't have a high expectation that they're likely to get that tag, but effectively their application, if they're successful, great. If not, they've still secured a point, for next year. So again, lots of ways to go about it, but hopefully that illustrates some consideration for a group that's kind of falls into this particular category. So the second example we have here is a larger party. We have a lot of larger parties across the province, but maybe this is the larger party of hunters from Southern Ontario. They don't want to go too far, so they're kind of interested in looking for a tag in Northeast Ontario. They'd like to have a bull tag. And I should mention they want to hunt in the gun season. They'd like to have a bull tag, but they'd like to have a second tag as well, so that they can all take some, plenty of meat home. So their application strategy is a bit different. They're focused on kind of an area of the province, as well as kind of a preferred tag types. So not a specific WMU, but an area, and again, they have a preferred tag type. So this hunting party is going to identify some WMU options kind of within that region that meet their interests, looking specifically at points required for bolt gun tags. And so when you look at the Northeast, I don't know, folks would kind of recall generally the map. We had a cluster of near Northeast units that required a very high number of points. This particular party doesn't really have the points to get into that ballpark. So they're looking at another tier of units that where the points required is a bit lower. So this shows an example of units 23, 27, 32, and 33, where the minimum points required are kind of in the ballpark of the point totals for the top 2 hunters in this particular group. The 2 top point total hunters, they apply. They don't really care specifically which unit it is. So the 15-point hunter is going to apply in 32 because he's kind of in that ballpark, and the hunter with 10 points is going to apply in 33 because his minimum or his points are near the minimum points required last year. Beyond that, this group then has to consider whether they want to try with their hunters that have 8 and 6 points, perhaps, to apply for a cow-calf gun tag in the primary with their first choice, or just look to build points and take their chances of applying for calf tags in the second chance allocation, particularly in steps 2 and 3, because it's not shown here, but tags were awarded in those random draw steps of the second chance. You take a chance there that you may not be awarded those tags because again, it's a random draw. But some hunters, if it's more important to build points and ensure that they have the opportunity to compete for adult tags in the future, may take that route. And so this last example is a group of hunters, so a small group, 3 hunters. They're willing to travel. They don't care what part of the province, but they want to hunt a bull moose during the gun season, and they want to, find a pretty good opportunity to not only give themselves a good chance to secure a tag, but an area where they feel like they have a good chance to harvest a bull, perhaps. So they look at their point totals, 9, 6, and 4, relative to a number of units where the point totals required are a bit lower. And so you have to go a little bit further north and west to find units that kind of fall into that category. And they have that flexibility, given that tag type really is kind of all that matters to them, or is most important. They can consider other things like, again, moose population status relative to objective, access, and other things. In this particular example, they're looking at units, WMUs 2, 3, 14, 15B, and 16A, and evaluating, where's the best opportunity there. They can consider things like potentially even for hunter crowding in some units, and that's an important consideration. Units like 15B can be pretty crowded at times, or go a little bit further off the beaten path up in the northwest in a unit like WMU2, where fewer points are required, but of course it is a lot further to go. So this group again has a lot of options. They can apply for tags with their first choice in the primary allocation stage, and if successful, claim it and have what they need to go. They could even take their chances in the second chance, given that if you look and see the minimum points required for these bull gun tags were a bit lower in the second chance. But it depends on how important it is for this group to secure a tag. If they want to make sure they hunt this year on a bull gun tag, they need to apply for it in their first choice of the primary allocation. So as I mentioned, these are just examples, and certainly within parties or individual hunters, there are a lot of ways to strategize your application. But again, it depends a lot on how committed you are to a particular unit, if you have a preferred tag type, and whether you want to hunt every year or only when you can get that preferred type in the unit that you like. So just a few final considerations, and not only about the allocation process and the applications, but more generally about preparing for the hunt itself. We would like to caution hunters to be aware that their approach to that first choice and the second chance allocation has big implications for other hunters. So we'd like to encourage hunters not to apply for tags in their first choice of the second chance allocation that they're not willing to spend their points on and claim tags, because otherwise there's no opportunity to allocate those tags to another hunter who may want them. We do expect application patterns and claim rates to change a bit this year and over the next couple of years, and that's for both the primary and the second chance allocation. And I think we'll probably start to learn from hunters a bit too, and how they kind of game the system, and we know that occurs, to make it work for them. We do want to emphasize to hunters, I mentioned this earlier, that of course, if you're going to hunt moose, you require a moose license, which you have to purchase separate from your application. So your application itself does not provide you a license. And it's also important to emphasize to hunters that you have to claim your tag before you purchase it, before hunting. In the primary allocation stage, that kind of looks after itself, because if you don't claim it, it just goes back in and is available in the second chance. But in the second chance allocation stage, we did hear a little bit that suggested some hunters, they were aware that they had been awarded a tag, but didn't actually bother to purchase it and print it. They just thought they had it at that point, and didn't actually. So you have to purchase it and print it, of course, to be legal. And the last couple pieces here, reminder: the primary allocation stage is open for applications until May 2nd. So ensure you get your application in. And finally, I did want to note again, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but we will be working with the Big Game Management Advisory Committee to review this process after the first few years. So we recognize we didn't get it exactly right, or I'm sure we didn't get it exactly right the first time. It is a complete overhaul of our allocation process. So the committee recommended that we do this, and we're committed to it after a few years, to look at those things that are working well, concerns of hunters, and any significant changes that result from that review. I would expect we will engage hunters on, and eventually we'll need to consult hunters on as well. So folks that have concerns, there will be a lot of opportunity over the next couple of years to identify those, and we can look at trying to address them when that time comes. So I think, Mark, that is the end of my rambling this evening. I'll leave this slide up. These are a lot of the resources I refer to. Actually, there's some others there. Folks want to copy these down, or I think a lot of this is The links are in the hunting rig summary, or pretty easy to find through kind of our family of either licensing or moose pages online.
Yeah, and some of those are actually now in answered questions in the Q&A. Some people had specific questions about how to find the open data catalog or moose population estimates that have been updated for a given WMU. So a lot of those links have actually been shared, but that's very valuable information. So first of all, thank you very much for that thorough and detailed explanation of the process. I hadn't seen your presentation in advance, and there were still some points that were very helpful to hear directly from you. So if you are willing, we are a little bit behind time, but again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have some flexibility for people who want to stick around. We can start diving through some questions in the Q&A if you're willing, Patrick.
Sure. Yep.
There's a question here that actually several people have asked in various forms. I know the answer to it, but I think it's best that they hear it directly from you. So if a hunter applies in the primary allocation stage, is awarded a tag, chooses not to claim it or doesn't claim it by the deadline, it goes into the second chance. But that hunter can presumably apply again in the second chance allocation, even for the same tag. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there is no penalty for not claiming a tag that has been awarded in the primary allocation stage.
No, there's no penalty at all at this point. We've heard from some folks that have suggested not claiming a tag should come with a penalty, but again, that's something to be considered in a future review if claim rates in particular don't improve.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess a somewhat related follow-up question there is, again, a hunter isn't obligated to apply in the primary allocation stage. They can simply skip that stage and apply in the second if they want, correct?
Absolutely. And we saw, I'm trying to recall how many new hunters, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 4,000 new hunters applied in the second chance in 2021 that hadn't applied in the primary.
Sorry, how many? Can you say that number again?
I think it was between 3,000 and 4,000 hunters.
Oh, okay.
New individual hunters applied in the second chance. Yeah, hadn't applied in the primary.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity for particularly the hunters that are relatively new or haven't applied and have very few points that don't have a realistic chance of potentially getting their desired tag in their desired area to simply get something through the random draw in the second chance allocation. So that's good. We have some questions that are related to that slide where you had the breakdown of the number of individual hunters and applications. So if you could, would you be willing to quickly tab back to that screen? There's a couple questions related to that I wanted to. One of the things, that one, yes.
Yep.
Yes,
okay.
thank you. One question is more general, I suppose, but how has the lower license sale levels affected the amount of revenue generated to the SPA? I know you mentioned that the number of moose licenses sold was lower than usual, but the number of individual applications was higher than we've seen in some time. So combined, all of that revenue being generated for the Fish and Wildlife SPA, how does that compare to what moose hunters would typically contribute in a given year to the SPA?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a concern we've heard from some other folks. So while the licenses sold was a bit lower than we projected, and there was a lot of work done to look at project what we expected for not only applications but license sales to ensure that we tried to maintain the revenue at prior levels. And that's the reason why or that's what led to the charging for the tags themselves. But while licenses sold was a bit down, our application numbers were higher than projected. So actually our revenue came out about what we projected, just with a different combination of products sold.
No, so not a major hit or reduction in revenue generated for the SPA.
No, actually, and I haven't heard the final tally, but we may come out on the plus side just a bit based on what our projections were, but we were pretty close.
Oh, that's good. And there were a lot of hunters, and even many of us in the OFAH actually, that were concerned when we first heard the initial proposal for this new system that the SPA might take a major hit. But that's excellent news to hear that, as far as we know so far, at least, there hasn't been a massive decline in revenue. The 97,342 individual hunters here that applied, does that include hunters that applied to that dummy WMU, just simply to get a point?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
it does. And I don't recall offhand how many hunters we had applied just for a point. It's a little complicated in that we could have had hunters that applied just for a point in the primary and then decided in the second chance to go ahead and apply for a tag in the second or third choice of the second chance, to see if they could possibly be awarded a tag while still building points. So I don't know how many individual hunters applied for just a point and how many applied, or a total number that applied for points. And maybe I'll ask Kyle if he knows offhand how many, but I'm thinking it's probably in the neighborhood of some maybe 5,000 applicants. I had seen a number at one point, but I can't recall specifically.
Okay, excellent. We hear a lot of concerns from hunters who are on the older end of the scale, who are maybe approaching the last few years of their hunting ability, have been doing it for 40 or 50 years. What can we say to the older hunters out there who got a tag last year, potentially for the first time in a long time, maybe even decades, who are now concerned that they will never have an opportunity to hunt again due to the number of points that are required in many of their areas?
Sure, and I can appreciate certainly that a hunter like that is committed to a specific wildlife management unit, in particular, could have those concerns. Presumably, though, a lot of the hunters that are in that category, again, they've been unsuccessful for many years, and they may have been unsuccessful or gone unsuccessful many more years without being awarded a tag in the previous system, because it gave no credit to those hunters who had applied a long time without being successful. So presumably a lot of those hunters are hunters that do hunt in parties, and if that's the case, hopefully within their party they can manage their points, and someone else may be coming along that has enough points to be awarded a tag. But I think there are ways in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, there are ways for a hunter to build points again and strategize in a way that they could certainly hunt moose. If they want to hunt moose, there are places to go and types of moose to hunt. It will be more difficult if they're committed to a specific wildlife management unit and they don't have they have a fairly small party that doesn't have a lot of points. It may be more difficult.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Thanks for that. Ken sent a question in via email. Ken, I had to reword your question a little bit just to keep it a little bit more concise, but we've heard from actually several hunters, not just Ken, but several people who are upset that they applied for a specific tag, were awarded one, claimed it, and obviously used up all of their points, only to find out later on that a good number of hunters who also applied in the same unit for the same tag type were awarded the same tag type with a lot fewer points. They also lost their points, but they didn't have nearly as many as somebody who, say, had 20 points built up. So let's say a hunter uses all 20 of their points on a bull gun tag, for instance, and then finds out that everyone else applying, or several other people in that unit, were awarded a tag with, say, 10 or 12 points. What can we say to these hunters who have this concern? Is there anything that could be done maybe in a future iteration of the system? And how can other hunters avoid having this happen to them in the first place? Or is
Yeah,
it even
so
possible?
well, we were aware that that was a possibility, and we tried to um, communicate to hunters and make them fully aware that that claiming a tag awarded based on points would cost all of your points. Um, and we did that, and the system is designed to operate that way because when we evaluated points-based systems elsewhere, one of the biggest issues with a system like this, um, or one of the biggest reasons it can fail over time, is if you get point creep. And one of the quickest ways to get point creep like that is by not requiring a hunter to forfeit all their points. So if they only have to forfeit some portion of them, that can lead to some pretty significant issues with point creep. And what I mean by that is that the points required for a particular tag type just continues to grow, irrespective of the number of tags available and such. There's just more points in the system each year. So that's a big issue, and so that's the reason the system was designed to require a hunter to forfeit all their points.
Okay, fair. Yeah, no, thanks for that explanation. That's a good point that I hadn't thought of either, actually. I'm going to quickly throw it over to the Director of Policy and Programs here at the OFAH, Matt DeMille. Matt, if you're still with us, Matt's been doing his due diligence, monitoring the Q&A for us tonight and trying to answer folks' questions. I'll see if Matt has any that he can throw to you, Patrick. Matt, are you still with us?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Patrick, for the presentation and great information and answering all these questions. And I will say that we've had a lot more questions and comments come in than we do have time to cover here. We will take some of the comments and some of the ideas that people have. We'll capture those and we'll make sure that we pass those along to Patrick and his colleagues to make sure that they know of some of these ideas that you have about how to improve the system. But some of the questions are more administrative. People are really interested in the data. That's clear. And one of the questions that has come in is about whether, this is from Rick, will the data be available for past years? Now that's plural, or is it just the previous year in that open data catalog?
I think we can probably set it up a couple different ways, but if possible, and there may be some limitations on how we publish the information there, but we'll do our best to ensure that we're kind of adding to what's there, if possible, rather than just replacing each year. So folks can see previous years if that's helpful. But I do have to mention, it's a big data set. So when folks download it, they'll realize how many rows of data are there, and that may have an impact on what we're able to do. So yeah, hopefully we can add to it, but I can't guarantee that's going to be a possibility. It'll depend on capabilities of that particular system.
Okay, and this is another question. It's come in from a few different people in a few different ways. It's not necessarily related to the point system, but is related in a sense of how people approach it, how they think about and strategize. It's related to the transfers. And so there's been a couple of questions about whether medical or transfers for medical reasons will be considered. And then a more specific one that asked, how long does it take for NDMNRF to approve an illness-based transfer request?
Yeah, so, we as part of the consultation on the process itself and the overall changes to our approach, we made clear that it was our intent not to allow transfers except in some exceptional circumstances. And illness and injury are a couple of those circumstances, but we have a policy that we've developed to guide our review of a transfer request. It requires again, a fairly rigorous process. an application from not only the person seeking to transfer the tag, but the person to receive the tag, and it requires, depending on circumstances, that doctor's signature and such. And so I can't speak to, because I don't manage the transfers myself. I can't speak to how long it takes, but I know there's a fair bit of scrutiny on those requests, given that it's our interest in not allowing transfers, and all to say a lot of rules around it. So it's not a quick process, and the one thing I would emphasize is if it's a condition that the hunter was aware of when they applied, it may not meet the criteria for allowing a transfer. So all to say that if a hunter thinks that it's not likely they are going to be able to hunt moose that year, it's best they don't claim that tag, because they may well be disappointed that the transfer isn't allowed.
Okay, thank you for that, Patrick. I think that probably the most common question, and I'll throw it back to Mark after this, but the most common question that we see in the Q&A so far in different forms, some are comments, some are ideas for how to solve it, and some are questions. There are a lot of questions around unclaimed tags and why the process for unclaimed tags is the way it is, and whether or not there will be changes associated with the way that process is done now.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's probably the single greatest concern that we have with how the process is functioning. Overall very well, but we recognize, and we don't want tags that a hunter would like to use to go hunting to be left on the table. So we are monitoring that closely. We do expect it to change in years 2 and 3 and even beyond. But it is, I think, something that we're likely to have to wrestle with when we get to the review, considering changes and what do we do to ensure that tags that hunters want are in their hands.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt, for jumping in there. A few questions about like behind the scenes kind of questions, I suppose. So Tim is asking, are we told that our tag is received through the random draw, so we know points still remain for the future? And I would actually expand that to, is it if a particular hunter applies for a few different tag types in both stages of the draw, they may not really remember exactly what they applied for in some of those cases. Is there a way for them to check that? Are they told what tag they were awarded and how when they are informed that they've been awarded a tag?
Yeah, so we're working, and I'll go back to that last slide here. We're working on an approach to better inform hunters whether they've been successful or not. In particular, we want to make sure that hunters that were awarded a tag are aware, and particularly in the primary, that they claim that tag before the deadline, where the tag would then go back into the second chance. If hunters, I'll just point folks to that kind of that last bullet. They can log into their Fish and Wildlife Licensing Service account, and in there they can view not only how they applied, but which step the tag was awarded on for the past and this year, so they can see what tag is there. But I guess back to where I was originally going there is we're working on better automating notifications to hunters that they've been successful. I think will require, yes, it will require them to have a Falls account with a valid email address to be notified, but to make them aware that they're successful. I don't know if that, and I doubt actually that notification would be specific, but it'll let them know that they need to go into their account, whether they were successful or not, go into their account and check it to take the necessary action to ensure if they were awarded a tag, that they can claim it. And there are tip sheets available in the fall service to help hunters with, with their applications and viewing their results and such.
Great, thanks. We have a few questions about tag fill rates. We know that with this data set, hunters could back calculate tag fill rates if they were really keen on doing so. Has the ministry given any thought to updating on an annual basis what tag fill rates have been used to calculate that year's quota, for instance?
Yeah, so that's a lot of another whole detailed set of information that's used. And as I mentioned in the example to start, in the harvest planning example, it's not just single year data. It's typically averages. In some cases, though, with some of our new tag types, so calf tags specifically in new areas, and where we have some relatively new bow seasons and quotas, we're using some fixed rates until we have enough years of data to produce an average. At the same time, we're actually also, our science folks are working with us to evaluate a potential modeling approach to applying fill rates, considering the factors that influence fill rates. So it's any number of things, like moose populations and access and other things. Yeah, we're doing a lot of work on fill rates. It's an area of great interest. We recognize the impact it has on quotas. And the thing I didn't mention, excuse me, when I was talking about harvest planning is, we're looking to come up with the best approach to fill rates where that result in our actual harvest being as close as possible to our planned harvest, that we can. That results in the best, most effective harvest plans to achieve our moose objectives. So we're evaluating a number of approaches to fill rates. That data on fill rates isn't available, and of course, yes, hunters could potentially calculate it looking at hunter reporting data and tags available and things like that. But that wouldn't give them the multi-years and the averages and that sort of thing. So it's not published anywhere, and like I said, it's fairly complex data, but yeah, we do know there's a fair bit of interest in it, and we're doing a lot of work in that realm too.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that sometimes causes either confusion or speculation among hunters when they see tag numbers go up and down. And one of the pieces of information that is obviously very influential that hunters don't have when seeing that information is the tag fill rates, right? And as you mentioned at the outset, a tag fill rate can swing quite a bit and cause a noticeable change in a tag quota in a given year. So that does cause some confusion and some speculation about what some of the driving factors are in the moose population.
The concern, I think the biggest concern we have now with fill rates in particular is that we have a number of units, a number of cases, particularly for higher demand tag types, where fill rates are increasing, and we're already seeing our estimated harvest greater than planned. And with the new system, if we see an increased claim rate, we could expect to see higher harvest levels. So that would put us further over harvesting a population. So that's a reason that we're really working on the data very closely, again, to ensure that to the extent we can, our fill rates are resulting in an estimated harvest as close to planned as possible.
Okay, good. We have a question here from Dan, who says that some wildlife management units have a low tag allocation, sometimes due to the accessibility of the unit or parts of the unit. Some of those units might have high moose densities in part of the WMU, but in areas that may not be accessible to hunters. Would the MNRF consider splitting some of these wildlife management units into subunits in the same way that they have for deer hunting in some parts of the province to address that issue, and thereby, in theory, increase tag allocation in the subunit where moose densities are higher?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's been something that's brought up. Certainly, our moose management policies would allow for some consideration of that. We're looking to, and the challenge with wildlife management units, and we have, of course, significant variation in the size of these units across the province, but they are units not only to manage hunters, but they are units that we use to manage moose populations. And from a moose population perspective, those populations are regulated and really much broader landscapes. So the challenge is that by subdividing, it may work better for hunter management and less well for moose population management. And there are potential ways around that, where you aggregate for one purpose and separate for another. But it's not, I guess, as simple as just dividing them so to manage hunter numbers. We have to give some consideration again to moose populations, and at this stage too, also to kind of our history of management, so we can relate the data that we're working with going forward to what we've gathered in the past, so we can learn from our management efforts. But it is an option that can be considered.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. A somewhat follow-up question, because you did mention moose population health and status there. It's relatively common knowledge that some units have gone without a moose aerial inventory for a long time, longer than ideal, for a variety of reasons, of course. How do regional bios base allocation in units that haven't been surveyed in a long time? Is it based entirely on harvest statistics, or are there other metrics that the MNRF is using to get a sense of what the moose population might be doing out there?
Yeah, so we certainly have units that have gone longer than we would like between surveys. And unfortunately, it was a tough survey winter, but we were able to get some surveys done, and we'll have, I'm sure, an ambitious plan for this coming winter to try to catch back up. But I would say that within accessible moose range, we haven't gone a long time for surveys. So we'd certainly like to have more immediate information on some, but and we'll hopefully be getting it in the next year or two. But we do have other information. Thankfully, the mandatory hunter reporting has been very successful, so we have much better information from that to look at things like moose seen per 100 day, for example, and evaluate what a population may be doing based on that information. We are at this stage reluctant to consider any significant change in the management approach for a unit based just on that data, because again, we only have now 3 years with the new mandatory hunter reporting data, so the more detailed and higher quality data. So it's going to take some time to evaluate it, relate it to information we actually get from MAIs. But like I said, we have put a significant investment in moose aerial inventory, and we expect to in the coming years. And we're not, like I said, we're not years out on most of the high demand units. So we'd always like to have newer stuff, but I think we're still overall in pretty good shape on most. And the one thing I did want to mention related to that point, and I didn't mention it earlier, we didn't talk specifically about MAI data, but we've gone through a kind of a tough period with our moose population. We saw significant declines following 2004. We started making some significant changes around 2014, 2013, 14 with tag reductions, and then some changes with calf season delay, and now the calf quotas. I would say, or hopefully, we're starting to see maybe the benefits of those changes. So folks that look closely at some of the units in Northeast Ontario that actually did get surveyed this winter will see that we had some pretty significant increases in a few units there. And I would attribute that, or like to say that it's at least in part from our, based on our management interventions there. So hopefully we're starting to see, turn the corner and see some improvement. And we'll see that in other units in the coming years.
Perfect, thanks. We got a couple more questions. I'm very conscious of time here. We're all already over time, and out of respect for your time, Patrick, and everyone else on the webinar tonight, we'll take a few more and then wrap it up. We've had a lot of questions about data, a lot of mentions of mandatory reporting, tag fill rates, and things like that. Where can people find, or can they find, the raw data for mandatory reporting, the results, the tag type and WMU specific results of the mandatory reporting process?
Yeah, so if folks go to our hunter reporting webpage, ontario.ca/hunter reporting, all one word, there are not only summaries on that page that you can download. So that's the basic summary of, hunters, harvest, that sort of thing. But there are links to more detailed data, again, in the open data catalog, hunter reporting information. So summary of hunters and harvests by wildlife management unit. It doesn't include all of the hunter reporting data, and we have talked about how we can build those data sets to include more of that data. But there's a fair bit of detail there. It goes back a number of years. So folks can kind of track how things have changed over time.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned something related a little bit earlier about being able to compare two sets of data when a big change has been made. Is there any concern about being able to compare the first couple of years of mandatory reporting harvest information to previous years? And can a hunter look through the entire data set and actually compare them directly, or should they actually, or should there be a caveat at a particular year after mandatory reporting has been imposed that the numbers are going to be reflective of a different process of collecting that information?
Hunters should view that data like we do, in that there's still value in the data prior to 2019. The metrics are much the same. There were some minor changes, but they're very similar. But the big thing is, like I said, just to be mindful that something changed in 2019. The biggest influence on the improved data from mandatory hunter reporting is that there's less potential for bias because we have the higher reporting rates, and the error around any estimates we come up with is much smaller in many cases. So the actual estimate may have been quite similar. It's just that the error associated with that estimate used to be much larger with our previous data. Not necessarily. It could have been wrong. With the less confidence, lower confidence, and poor response rate, those estimates may have been off. But right. More likely, like you said, it's the estimates were similar. It's just that the error associated with it was bigger in the past.
Perfect. I got one question related to the tourist industry, and then I'll let you go. I'll let you off the hook with a softball question about the point process. Are there any plans to change the tourist industry tag allocation system based on shares? And somebody else is asking, where can they learn more about the tourism industry tag allocation and that process itself?
Yeah, so there isn't any place where that's described in detail, that tourism industry process. And I want to make clear that there are two separate things. There is the allocation of moose hunting opportunities between residents and tourism industry. So the number of moose that each can potentially harvest. Mm-hmm. And then there is the allocation of actual tags within the tourism industry. So once the example that I showed earlier, I think the tourism industry got 10 tags and residents got 90. We have a specific process used to allocate those 10 tags among tourist outfitters, or if it was 10 tags, it was 10 moose actually in that case. But and that's based on shares, and that isn't captured anywhere publicly. You know, we can certainly describe it to folks who may be interested, but a short version is 1,000 shares per unit divided up among the outfitters that are in each unit, and that's used to then divide the tags based on how many shares each has. We have had questions from the tourism industry about potential for changes in that allocation system. And that was a recommendation of IGMAC that we evaluate that, and we still do intend to have some discussions about that. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure how we come up with a better system, particularly once a system like that is established, to change it. You know, if you're an outfitter, to blow that up and do something different, you almost have to start from scratch. So it's right. It's very challenging to kind of start over, consider something different there. But we will be having discussions about that with the tourism industry, and see where that goes.
Okay, so that information, like a hunter could not find that information online anywhere and sort of teach themselves about how it works?
No, it's not described anywhere, and there are a lot of rules. Like I said, it's information that we would be willing to share, but I almost have to share it like, give me a call and I'll explain it to you, sort of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. I think final question for the evening. This one, and there are actually a few questions that relate to, I guess, the distribution of hunting opportunities between gun hunters and bow hunters. I'll stick with one question in particular. In the new bow hunting areas, did the bow quotas come at the cost of reduced gun tag quotas?
So it would. I mean, we're not dealing with more moose to allocate, but if hunters look at it based on tag numbers, they'll have they won't have an accurate representation of like how much they potentially lost or gained. Right. We recognize that many gun hunters were not thrilled with losing opportunities to bow hunters. So when we created those new bow seasons and quotas, we kept the bow allocation pretty small. 10% was our target, 10% of opportunity. The real benefit of bow, and this is not the case everywhere, because in some cases bow hunter success or fill rates are actually higher than gun fill rates. But in most cases, gun fill rates are still a bit higher than bow. And so by allocating a small portion of opportunity to bow hunters, we actually create more overall tags. And I think from a gun hunter perspective, I would encourage gun hunters to think about it as that leads to then less competition, because it'll draw some portion of hunters away from competing for the gun tags, because they're primarily applying for the bow tags, as well as potentially a little less crowding in the bush, between bow and gun hunters, because they're separated then by different seasons or what.
Fair enough. And given that we are rolling up to 9 o'clock here, I think that we'll shut it down here for the night. As I mentioned, this this entire webinar has been recorded. It will be made available probably sometime next week by the time we get it uploaded. Anybody who registered and provided an email address through that registration process will receive an email notifying them that the video is available, and feel free to rewatch parts. Feel free to send Dr. Keith Monroe or myself any outstanding questions. We have several questions here that we simply didn't have the time to get to. We will do our best to address as many of those as possible in other ways. But aside from the questions, Patrick and Kyle, I want to thank you both very much. Patrick for the presentation tonight, and both of you for obviously the huge amount of work and background efforts that went into preparing the presentation, all of the analysis that was conducted, the data sets that were created and made publicly available for hunters. That's all greatly appreciated. I appreciate your time tonight.